The most realistic combat system in any RPG. And it says, I mean, that's quite a claim. That's quite a claim right there. The most realistic combat system in any RPG. And there's an asterisk down here, the only RPG approved by the Association for Renaissance Martial Arts. So that's how they're making that claim. But quite a claim, quite a claim. The most realistic combat system in any RPG requiring thought, strategy, and cunning, not just brute strength or hack and slash mentality. Here we are, The Riddle of Steel, Book 4, The Codex of Battle. So let's see what it's trying to do here. Combat, gritty realism. Combat in The Riddle of Steel is unlike any combat system you've ever seen. There are no hit points, no initiative rolls, and as little abstract thought as possible. Instead, the system is based on years of hands-on martial research and training. Though still a game, it's closer to representing real sword fighting than any RPG combat system ever written. In italics there. We will see what we think. A few words of advice are then in order. A, never get hit, ever. You probably won't recover. All right. B, use your head. Here, as in the real world, fights are won very much through strategy, not just high stats or big swords. C, even the smallest weapon is deadly. Would you want to be stuck with a knife? Neither would your character. D, teamwork, teamwork, teamwork. Need we say more? E, there's a fine line between being brave and stupid. Don't be stupid. F, have a backup plan or a good idea of what your next character should be like. It's up to you. So, to illustrate, picture 3 new characters walking along the road. They hear some noise up ahead and see 5 burly troll-like guys. Some folks call them ghouls. Read about them in Book 7. Should your 3 heroes charge them head on? Not in The Riddle of Steel. 5 on 3 is bad odds. Just think back to wrestling your friends as a kid. So instead, our heroes hide in the bushes and concoct a plan. Heaven forbid, a plan. They decide to rush out of the bushes as these trolls pass, striking 3 of them down before they even know what hit them. That puts the odds at 3 on 2 in their favor. Much better. Remember, it only takes 1 hit to ruin your character's day forever. What do we think about that? Okay, so melee combat is referred to as hand-to-hand fighting. It involves swords, axes, fists, shields, and footwork. All melee combat is based on one major set of dice, the combat pool. Each point in your combat pool equals 1 die. The combat pool, called CP, is used to activate certain maneuvers, to attack, and to defend. Over the course of a duel or bout, you will divvy up and refill your pool several times. Factors such as wounding and external circumstances will cause your pool to fluctuate. We recommend using 2 small bowls to keep track of how many dice are in your pool at any given time and how many have been spent. Flow of time in combat. Whenever a situation involving combat begins, the Seneschal, that's our game master, declares that time is now measured in combat rounds. A round in the Riddle of Steel lasts approximately 1 or 2 seconds, during which attacks are made and other events take place. Each round is then divided into 2 combat exchanges, sometimes called an exchange of blows. An exchange, being half a round, is roughly how much time it takes to attack with a weapon and begin to recover. The whole series of rounds constitutes a bout or a fight. Bouts occasionally undergo a pause when opponents circle each other or break apart. Those pauses are still measured in rounds. One may assume that these rounds last much longer than 1 or 2 seconds. The order of round. All right. 1. Declare stance. Establish aggressor and defender. Initiative. Combat pool fills or refreshes with all modifiers. Oh, so 1, declare stance. 2 is establish aggressor and defender. Initiative. Combat pool fills or refreshes with all modifiers. 3. First half of the exchange of blows. Aggressor attacks and defends, and defender defends. 4. Resolve damage and or determine new attitude. Aggressor or defender. 5. Second half of the exchange of blows. Aggressor attacks and defender defends. These roles may have been reversed since the first exchange. 6. Resolve damage and or determine new attitude. Aggressor or defender. Steps 1 to 6 continue to repeat until the end of a bout or the flow is interrupted, a pause. At the beginning of a new bout or following a pause, begin at step 1, and step 1 is declare stance, and then repeat 2 through 6 as normal. So steps 1 and 2, initiative. Very rarely do both opponents attack simultaneously. That kind of thing might look neat, but it's not for those who wish to live very long. At the beginning of a melee, duel, bout, or any type of combat, mess, each character must secretly decide whether they are going to attack, assuming the attitude of the aggressor at this time, or hold back and see what their opponent plans, taking the role of defender. If enough time is present, both parties should declare a stance. This is done out loud and should be done without hesitation. See stances below for more. Now, remember those red and white dice we recommended in book 1? Here's where they really come in handy. This is the red and white D10 dice. Here's where they really come in handy. When time slows to combat rounds, each active character takes 1 red die and 1 white die in their hands. After stances are declared, if there's time, the seneschal calls out throw, and each combatant drops 1 of the 2 dice on the table. A red die indicates aggression, and white die indicates defense. If a combatant fails to throw any die down, then that character has hesitated and may only defend for 1 full exchange. So what you do physically at the table is actually influencing what your character is doing, right? Have you ever played one like this? I have not. I've never played this combat system. I had the RPG and I read it, but I never got to play it. If a combatant, okay, so we just said that each aggressor, in order from lowest reflex to highest, now declares how many dice from his combat pool are being spent on the attack, where the attack is aimed, and what maneuver, if any, is being used. Defenders now, in response to their attackers, declare how many dice from their combat pool are going towards defense, what kind of defense they're using, and what maneuver, if any, is being used. Okay, choose how many dice in your combat pool. I'm not sure how you create your combat pool, but how many dice are in there you're allocating to defense, to attack, how many are allocated to defense. I'm guessing that you won't have more to use if you use them up in this exchange. Matters grow especially messy should both combatants attack, both throwing a red die. A contest of reflex with the combatant's ATN, I believe that's the attribute target number for ATNs, or with the combatant's ATNs, that's something to do with attack there, for target numbers. See exchange of blows, and the appendix for weapon ATNs, so something to do with the weapon, determines whose strike lands first. Remember that no defense is possible in the middle of an attack, so the loser of this contest usually ends up dead. The process, red and white dice, is only used at the beginning of a bout or following a pause. In all other rounds, the winner of the previous exchange takes or retains initiative. This does sound fun, though. Stances provide stronger attacks and defenses at the cost of predictability and flexibility. While each school has its own stance and positions it claims are better, 3 are universal, at least where the game purposes are involved. Appearance or exact position may be varied. Aggressive stances, defensive stances, and neutral stances. Aggressive stances provide a bonus to attack when making defense more, while making a defense more difficult. The classic samurai with katana raised high is a good example. Such stances add 2 combat pool dice when attacking, but increase the activation cost for any defensive maneuver by 2 CP. Okay, so if you adopt an aggressive stance, you're getting 2 additional combat dice while attacking. Defensive stances provide a bonus to defense while making attacking harder. Most stances with the blade or weapon head facing down are good examples. Such stances add 2 CP dice, 2 combat dice when defending, but increase the activation cost for offensive maneuvers by 2 CP. So table 4.1, surprise and hesitation target numbers. We said if you fail to drop the die, you hesitate. So purposefully standing with no stance, perhaps to invite an attacker, aware of opponent, victim of cheap shot, or you hesitated, unsuspecting or inattentive, blinds indeed. Neutral stances allow a great deal of flexibility and are favored by many schools. In a neutral stance, the sword or other weapon is positioned to allow a quick attack or defense. Such stances provide no bonuses to either attack or defense. Stances only last until the first blow or movement. If a character's weapon moves, the stance is broken. Very few swordsmen can evade an attack and retain their stance. During the bout itself, the stances of both attacker and defender are considered to be neutral. No bonuses either way. A stance can be taken or retaken until the combatants. A stance cannot be taken or retaken until the combatants separate and cease for a moment. The bout must be interrupted by a full pause. Okay, so that's why one of the reasons why these pauses are important. Maybe if both people throw defense, you're in a pause. Could that be the case? If both people defend, you pause, and then you could adopt a new stance or whatever. Retro Nerd Girl says, "I agree. Sounds exciting." Yeah, I want to try out a bunch of these different combat systems. I want to be able to do that. And this is definitely one that I think would be fun to try out. I think it'd be fun to try out just for the combat, right? Just pull together some characters and try out the system. So, surprise, we're going to run a little bit long today, but that's okay. I want to get through this this combat here. We started a little bit late because we had other things to talk about this morning, but I want to get through through this combat because I'm excited about it. So surprise is a common element even when one is aware of an enemy. Sometimes a character is unprepared for an incoming attack. Perhaps they are surprised or hesitated. You better throw a die at the beginning of melee, huh? To check for surprise, or in a similar situation, the unsuspecting character rolls reflex against a TN based on how alert the character was. So to check for surprise, the unsuspecting character rolls reflex against a TN based on how alert the character was. Table 1.4 suggests guidelines. The Seneschal has the final say. So that's what we were looking at here. Surprise and hesitation target numbers. Oh, so that's whether or not you are surprised. So that's your target number for a reflex roll based on what was going to you, whether or not you're surprised. Failure indicates no action may be taken until the next round. Success, even one, means you may defend or attempt to buy initiative. Okay, buying initiative. Buying initiative or a preemptive strike is the art of the samurai or the gunslinger, or in our case, blade slinger. Waiting for your opponent to strike, then attempting to beat him to the blow. It's a risky move used by the desperate, the quick, and the suicidal. Initiative is usually bought in one or two circumstances. The first is when two combatants attack simultaneously. The loser of the previous contest for initiative may attempt to buy initiative by spending a number of dice equal to the opponent's perception. Spending a number of dice equal to the opponent's perception. A contest roll is then made of the buyer's WP. That was, I believe that's one of the statistics. And the opponent's wit, because wit was one of the opponent's statistics. A contested roll. Okay, and we read how to do contested rolls. So both people are rolling here. A contested roll is then made by the buyer's WP and the opponent's wit, with both TNs being equal to the other's reflex. Okay. The buyer, and only the buyer, may opt to raise his opponent's TN by 1 for every extra combat die spent to a maximum bonus of his own wit. I'm going to have to see this in action. The winner of the contest strikes first. The loser may strike second, assuming any dice remain in the combat pool. The second situation where one may wish to buy initiative is when a character who has previously declared defense wishes to attack instead. The process is identical to the above. In either case, both attackers have committed themselves and may not withdraw, which may cause a real mess. Oh, here is our hit location zones right here. Didn't we say this was a D6 roll? I believe we did. We'll have to see how to get to higher numbers. So taunting is the last resort of a fighter who is tired of circling and circling. The effect of both sides throwing white dice and declaring defender for several rounds in a row. Okay, so that's what happens. You're both circling, both saying defender, both saying defender. That's pausing, I guess, and that's circling. By taunting, one can force one's opponent into becoming the attacker. This is accomplished by trying the patience, WP, of your opponent through insults and the like. It is not possible until both opponents have circled for at least 5 rounds. This effective tactic is handled with the ridicule skill, which may be defaulted for those without the skill. Okay, step 3 and 5, exchange of blows. Maybe this is when we're actually landing something here. So each round, as discussed above, consists of 2 exchanges. During each individual exchange, each party gets 1 action, meaning that one usually attacks and the other defends. Usually. Every attack must be directed at a specific location numbered with a Roman numeral. Okay, that's right. You're supposed to decide where your attack is aimed. So here are your options right here. You've got what Roman numeral is that? 14, 1 to 14. So there are 14 different hit locations that you can aim for. Every attack must be aimed at a specific location. 1 through 6 are for swinging attacks. So some of them you can only attack if you are swinging. 7 through 14 are for thrusting or missile attacks. It's not necessary for a player to declare the exact number, but the location and variety of attack, overhand slash, upper hand slash, thrust to face, etc., are completely necessary. It is giving us that in italics. That is completely necessary. No one attacks randomly, but those who hesitate. Maneuvers and targeted locations may change difficulty for either the attacker or the defender. Both combatants, aggressor and defender, now roll the allotted combat dice from step 2 with all modifiers for maneuvers, stances, and other factors. This is a normal contested roll, and we learned how to roll those, where the loser's success are subtracted from the winners, leaving the winner with the margin of success. Okay, all targeted numbers for the roll come from the ATN. Okay, ATN is attack target number. Okay, come from the ATN or the DTN, the defense target number, used when defending listed for each weapon. See the appendix. Okay, the winner, after damage is resolved, may press the advantage by taking or keeping initiative, the role of the aggressor, if he so chooses. If the defender successfully defends, then he may take the role of the aggressor. Ties, while no damage is dealt, are considered to go to the attacker for purposes of initiative. Such ties usually imply the defender has just barely deflected the strike and is still recovering from the momentum of the blow he just blocked, parried, or dodged. Finally, should the loser wish to attack during the next exchange, normally impossible, he has 2 choices. First, he may simply declare an attack. The winner attacks and resolves damage first. If the loser has any dice left, he can attack. This is a foolhardy maneuver. The second choice is to buy initiative as per step 2. This requires no additional rolls other than standard process of buying initiative, see above. Multiple opponents. Multiple opponents may be dealt with by simply dividing up one's combat pool between the 2 opponents in any proportion. Wise fighters will try to move around so they only have to face one opponent at a time. Doing so acts as terrain below. Success in such a situation allows you to fight just one opponent at a time. Failure indicates that one or more opponent has gotten through, forcing you to split your combat pool. Fumbling brings 2 or more opponents onto you. No more than 3 opponents may engage a character at a time. Just imagine 6 guys in a tight circle swinging sharp, pointy objects every which way, trying to hit you but not their buddies. Exceptions to this rule include groups of spearmen and the like, who may gather tightly and together and thrust. Group chases. Even 2 or 3 opponents will drain your combat pool very quickly. Encounters with odds like this should be avoided at all costs. Okay, so that's why one of the reasons why fighting so many people at a time is bad, because you're going to be fighting them all simultaneously, and you only have so many dice in your combat pool. So you're going to have to divide that among everybody, and so you're going to run out, kind of like your bandwidth, I guess. You're going to run out of that very quick if multiple people are attacking you at the same time. We do have information on terrain here, and I saw the terrain modifiers up here. Terrain, and we got stand, crawl, cautious, normal, hurried, sprinting. We apply these modifiers in some way. Higher footing, such as stairs or horses, adds 2 CP at the beginning of the round. Weapon length or reach often means the difference between striking one's enemy and missing them entirely. Weapon lengths have been divided into 6 categories: hand, short, medium, long, very long, extremely long. Attacks against a longer weapon are made at -1 CP for each step. short to medium, or medium to long. The attacker wishes to close. Attacking a pikeman with a dagger would put you at negative 5 CP. This penalty holds until a shorter weapon makes a damaging strike, after which the penalty transfers to the longer weapon until he scores a damaging blow, in which the penalty goes to the shorter weapon. When the shorter weapon is out of range, this penalty applies only to attacks. When the longer weapon is penalized, it applies to both offense and defense. Well, that's interesting. That's a really interesting way to handle the lengths of weapons, which I think is generally underused. I like that. I like that. I mean, that seems, with my limited experience of swordsmanship and spear, yeah, if you're trying to close with the sword, the spear has got the advantage. But as soon as you close with that spearman is in full defense until they can get away. So often the best course of action for long weapons is to use full evasion in the event of sudden close combat. Well, it makes sense to me. Yeah, exactly. Or to drop weapons and wrestle, or draw something shorter. That's why a lot of spearmen carry a short weapon, short sword, or something like that with them. Certain maneuvers, such as the half sword, are particularly effective in this situation. Likewise, many weapons, such as spears and other two-handed weapons, may shorten their reach. Fumbling or botching the results in failure to strike anything and allows the weapon's momentum to lose control. Botching on attack may cause the weapon to drop, break, or otherwise be rendered useless. Botching reduces your combat pool on the next you change by half the number of dice you spent on the failed attack. All right, 5 and 6. So step 4, steps 5, 4, and 6 damage. All right, what happens to us when we actually take damage? Something tells me something rather brutal. Should an attacker have one or more successes over his opponent, then the attack has landed. Okay, because it was a contested roll. We're subtracting the person who was more successful over the person who was less successful. And a d6 is rolled to determine specific location within the targeted zone. Okay, so we know that we have to declare how we're striking, but then a d6 is rolled to determine specific location within the targeted zone. So maybe we're supposed to declare a zone, but then what exact body part is hit, we'll have to roll for. I'll have to look that up again. Generally speaking, lower rolls mean lower hits, higher rolls mean higher hits. The exact location is important, as in the Riddle of Steel, there are no hit points or generic damage. Every hit causes a real wound. As such, the only way to kill a man is to deal a fatal blow or let him bleed to death. Wound tables are found in the appendix. Damage is determined by taking the number of final successes in the margin and adding to that the number of the damage rating, DR, of the weapon being used. So take your number of successes, okay, and then we're adding to that, kind of like a damage multiplier in GURPS, I suppose, the DR of this weapon. Melee weapons have a DR of strength -2 to strength +3. So, okay, so it's based off your strength modified by this weapon. That's your damage. Hey, Gravendal. It's Gravendal Games. No problem. We're going a little bit late here ourselves because we are in the middle of what is supposed to be the most realistic combat system in all of RPG publication history, at least according to the marketing material for this particular game. Have you ever seen the Riddle of Steel or ever played this? I am excited about it. I've read it before, but we got to try this out. So we're basing weapon damage on our own strength plus our successes. So the success is basically like our skill, but then we're modifying that by the effectiveness of our weapon. The defender, now struck, subtracts his own TO. I have to see what that is. His own TO and armor value, if any, depending on location, from the attacker's total damage. The result is the wound level, which is cross-referenced on the damage tables. See the appendix. According to type, cutting, puncturing, bludgeoning, and location. 1d6 per zone above. So margin of, if you're hit, margin of success plus weapon damage modification plus any other modification minus TO of your defender minus armor value of that particular location results in wound level. Cross-reference wound level on the damage tables. All right. Armor, a rare and expensive commodity, only provides protection to those areas which it covers. Hence, if someone is wearing a helmet is struck in zone 4 and the attacker rolls a 4, the neck, then the helmet provides no protection whatsoever. The following example should help. All right, let's do an example. Geralt, a well-practiced but poor and unarmored blade slinger and swordsman, is dueling at swords with Felix, a lightly armored knight. Geralt has a strength of 5, a TO of 4, that has something to do with our defense, or damage reduction, and his combat pool is 15. Okay, so he's got 15 dice to work with. Felix has a strength of 6, a TO of 5, and a combat pool of 12. Felix, having initiative from a successful parry, strikes at 4 from his own right-hand side with 7 dice, an ambitious attack. Geralt, wisely knowing how important it is that he not get hit, assigns 9 dice to his defense, a parry from below. Both combatants throw their allocated dice. Felix, the attacker, gets 4 successes. Geralt rolls 5 successes and parries the blow. Because of his successful defense, Geralt now has the initiative and thus opts to attack Area 4 from his own left. Notice the fluid motion from parry to attack. This is intentional. Spending his remaining 6 dice, Felix realizes his mistake and throws the last 5 of his dice in a parry from the side. Geralt scores 5 successes, and Felix scores only 1, leaving Geralt with a margin of 4. This looks really bad for old Felix. Geralt's weapon has a damage rating of strength plus 1, so the subtotal, or wound rating, is 10. Rolling location on d6, Geralt scores a direct hit to the neck. Felix is unarmored there. Felix then subtracts his TO, 5, from the total. 10 minus 5 is equal to 5. A level 5 wound anywhere is a nasty wound and usually fatal. In the neck, it kills instantly. Ugh, decapitation does that. Okay, I don't mind the detail if you aren't having to spend 10, 12, 14, 16 rounds in combat trying to resolve something, right? The hit location, the going back and forth. I mean, in this case, we only basically did it once. This combatant took the battle really fast, and so I don't mind the extra detail because we're not having to do this 40 times. And I do like that. I like it when combat is quick and brutal. One of my least favorite things is D&D style combat that just goes around in circles around the table over and over and over again, trying to clear hit points, chip away at hit points. I hate that. So this does sound more interesting. Wound levels are rated from 0 to 5. A 0 level wound is usually a bruise or a scratch with no notable adverse effects. Level 1 wounds are a tad bit worse, level 3s are quite dangerous, and level 5s are usually fatal or close to it. Location always makes a difference as well, as a level 3 to the head is a lot worse than 3 to the shoulder. Wound levels are not cumulative, though the Seneschal may rule that several smaller wounds to the exact same location may add up in some way. It takes a solid hit to do a man in. As is evident from the above example, only one solid hit is necessary for a kill. Skill, luck, and strategy are all needed elements in the fight to survive, so choose your battles wisely. Damage types are an important, or wear a lot of armor, I guess. Damage types are an important part of the damage that a weapon does. Barring sorcery, fire, or other sources of damage, the most common are listed below. Most melee and missile weapons are counted as one of 3 types, those dealing cutting wounds, puncture wounds, or bludgeoning wounds. Cutting wounds are the most common, swords being what they are, though the other types have their advantages. Puncture wounds caused by spears, arrows, sword points, and the like do more internalized damage and are generally deadlier than cuts. They use the thrusting locations. Bleeding from puncture wounds is harder to stop than from cuts, as is usually internal. Bludgeoning wounds caused by hammers, clubs, pommels, quarterstaffs, and the like are the least damaging, although still deadly. The primary advantage is that when they strike the shoulder or pelvic region, they can get a kill with a level 5 wound, as crushed bone severs arteries and other vessels. They also incite a high shock number, even against armored opponents. See knockout below. Go Warhammer against armored opponent. Go Warhammer. representing the momentum of the blow and trauma. Bludgeoning attacks are usually targeted for the arced areas, 1 through 7, though weapons such as the quarterstaff or fist may be targeted to forward or thrusting areas. I'm going to have to figure out exactly how all of that works. 8 through 14. Finally, for fire, electricity, cold, and other abstract forms of damage, there is a general damage table or generic damage table. Shock and pain. We saw pain. We saw blood loss. We're going to have pain, shock, blood loss, bleeding all over the place in this combat. I would rather have fewer combat. I'd rather have fewer battles that are more fun and more exciting and have more impact on the game than a lot more to grind through. I really would. Shock and pain measure how badly a given wound immediately affects one's ability to fight and carry on. Every wound should have its own rating for both. Shock subtracts dice. Okay, so shock and pain. Let me say, I was thinking about something else. So shock and pain are going to influence how badly a given wound immediately affects one's ability to fight and carry on. Okay, that's like GURPS, where you've got shock, because if you are hit for a certain amount of injury, you immediately subtract that amount of injury from your next attack or other action, right? Because you are reeling from having been hit. So we got something similar here. Shock subtracts dice from all dice pools, both combat and sorcery-related pools, immediately upon receiving the blow. Should the shock rating exceed the current CP, the remainder of the penalty is applied at the beginning of the next round. So it carries over, unless the pain penalty is greater. Shock only applies once for each wound, unless the same body part is struck a second time. Pain is subtracted from one's pools at the beginning of every combat round. Whereas shock is a static number, one's WP, that's one of your attributes, can reduce the effects of pain. Pain is also important in figuring out healing times as described in the laws of nature. Shock and pain are cumulative as long as they are applied to different zones. Should one attack in the same area be hit multiple times, the highest shock penalty, new or old, is applied or reapplied to the wounded party. It can benefit. So we do have something that looks like a death spiral here. So some people don't like this, but it did tell you right from the beginning with this that getting hit is bad. So don't go into combat lightly, and when you do, you need to make sure that you're not hit, because all of a sudden having someone cut you open with a sword is going to make it easier to cut you open the second time. So combat, deadly. Should one attack? I mean, it even makes me want to try something like a dungeon crawl with this. And it seems like, no, you couldn't do a dungeon crawl with this because, aren't you supposed to cut through hundreds and hundreds of monsters? Well, maybe. In the other cases, probably wouldn't work. But when you think about something like the Mines of Moria, one way, think about the Mines of Moria in the books. Like, they didn't actually do a whole lot of fighting in the Mines of Moria. They were in the Chamber of Mazarbul. They had this brief skirmish, right? And then they tried to get away. They weren't actually cutting through, hundreds and hundreds of orcs and goblins like it's Diablo or something like that, right? So you could do I think some type of dungeon crawl with this where things are desperate. It's dark. You're moving through the Mines of Moria type kind of thing. And then when combat here hits, man, it is sharp and desperate, right? And you got to get away, and you got to really think about how you're going to handle this situation inside a dark dungeon. I'm excited. I frequently get excited when we're going through these different RPG rules, but this one, I haven't read this in years. I'm so glad I thought about it today. Okay, so when recording wounds, so it can be beneficial to attack a well-wounded area over and over, even with weak attacks. The original shock penalty will keep on returning to haunt the wounded. Okay, because shock only counts that once, right? But should one attack the same area multiple times, the highest shock penalty, new or old, is applied or reapplied. That's why if somebody is majorly cut open in an abdomen or something, I guess, even if you're going to land a weaker attack, go ahead and land it to the opponent's already wounded area. When recording wounds on your character sheet, make a note of where the exact wound is and what effects it may have, such as shock, pain, and blood loss. Blood loss is BL. We use notations such as level 3 cut, 6-4 left, meaning we got to get our own notation here. Meaning level 3 cutting wound at zone 6, section 4 from the d6 roll on the left side, or just write level 3 cut left neck to make sure to record the pain rating as for each individual wound as well. Hopefully receiving a wound will be a rare occurrence, meaning that you won't need to write this information down too often. So yeah, that's a lot to record, but hopefully this isn't something that is happening to you. Blood loss. Blood loss covers the deteriorations of one's health due to bleeding and internal damage. Each wound carries, alongside shock and pain, a blood loss target number. These numbers are cumulative, adding up to one big blood loss number, so long as the wounds come from different parts of the body. Okay, we got to remember that. Some things are cumulative to the same part of the body. Others are not. As I recall, this one's not. At the beginning of each round, all wounded characters must roll endurance, EN, versus blood loss. Whenever a roll is failed, 1 point of health, HT, is temporarily lost. When HT reaches 1, all attributes and pools are halved. When HT reaches 0, the character enters a coma and dies. Assuming the wounded party lives, 1 point of HT is recovered for every day of rest. Knockdown and knockout are covered by the derived statistics of the same name. Anytime a character receives a blow that through pain or shock reduces his CP to less than 0, he may be knocked down. In such an instance, roll the knockdown trait against TN equal to twice the number of your attacker's margin of success, counting after your defense, but before armor, the TN is 3 times your attacker's successes if struck with a mass weapon. Many blows to the head or legs may call for knockdown rolls. The TN for each roll is equal to the shock of the TN without any WP modifications. I forget what WP is. Is it will something? It's one of our stats. Knockout rolls are covered by the knockout trait. It looks like we're going over to missile combat. We're not going to do missile combat today, but I do want to take a look at some of the tables. So knockout rolls are covered by the knockout trait. Such rolls may be called due to certain wounds. So Retro Nerd Girl, I should have come over here. Retro Nerd Girl says, so you can strategize attacks to the same location to gain some advantage. Yes, exactly. Sweet. Yeah, we could get really brutal with this really fast. Okay. When you first I read bring highlighters, and I was going to say yes, because we got to highlight some important parts in this book. But bring hirelings. Yes, bring hirelings. That is also seems to be an important part of this. So knockouts are covered by the knockout trait. Such rolls may be called for due to certain wounds, especially blows to the head, see appendix, or under circumstances under the Sensual's direction. Such rolls are made against a TN of 7, modified according to the severity of the wound. Again, as outlined in the appendix. Failure on one of these rolls results in 1d10 seconds of unconsciousness. I'm sure that's not good to be unconscious in front of your foe, especially in this game. Fumbling such a knockout roll results in 1d10 times 10 minutes of unconsciousness. Optionally, knockout rolls are also called for every time a character receives a blunt roll to the head, whether armored or not, at a TN of 10 minus AR armor rating. I have to see how that goes. We wouldn't want that just like knocking people out too often. Such blunt trauma causes a shock penalty equal to half of the attacker's damage. That's DR plus attack successes. Each success on this knockout roll drops the shock by 1 die. This modifier is not in addition to the normal shock and pain modifiers inflicted by telling wounds. By telling wounds. That's the first time I've seen that phrase. The only result of failure is the shock value is not lessened. One does not lose consciousness unless real damage is dealt. This rule helps simulate both fist fighting and the disorienting but not damaging blows that a helmeted combat may receive to the head. Okay. Something trying to simulate some kind of like subdual damage or something. So fatigue, and then let's go look at the tables. Fatigue is an optional rule that simulates the wear and exhaustion that comes from constant physical exertion. The characters wearing heavy armors, those made of metal or those that cover most of the body, lose 1 combat point for every, I believe that's endurance rounds. Thus, Sir Vord, who has an endurance of 4, loses 1 CP every 4 uninterrupted rounds spent fighting or otherwise physically active. So that says uninterrupted rounds. So I suppose if you pause, then you're not having to take that. Those persons wearing little or no armor lose 1 CP every 2 times EN rounds. Sir Vord, fighting unarmored this time, now loses 1 CP every 8 rounds. These points may be recovered by taking a few seconds to rest and rolling EN. Oh, you gotta roll something. Each success reduces fatigue by 1 point. Okay, like I can't see how this is going on for 8 rounds. Let's go check out. Oh, this looks like. Oh, wow. Okay, we got lots of tables. Okay, let's see. Appendix 1 damage tables. Okay. So, modifiers for striking at different zones. I think we saw that before. Um So let's just see what's on these damage tables. This is cutting damage table, a roll of okay. So here, maybe now I understand our zone. So this is zone 1. We're declaring a zone. Okay. So if we're declaring a zone to attack, then we're basically declaring that we're attacking toward anything from looks like the knee down the shin to the foot. That's why that D6 is required. So I'm not declaring foot. We're going to get to the detail of you attacked the foot, but at least we're saying you're not having to declare that level of detail. You're saying you're attacking zone 1, which is lower leg. Okay. Lower legs. Okay, so this is right here. Cutting zone table, zone 1, right and left lower legs. Now, how do we deal with things that are not humanoid in shape? I don't know. That's always a downside to these kinds of things. What happens when you start fighting the spider? So we're fighting the lower legs here. Roll of 1, you hit the foot. 2 through 4, you hit the shin and lower leg. And 5 through 6, you hit the knee and nearby areas. Okay, and now we determine what type of hit we had. And we said what kind of wound level it was. So that was wound level 0, basically nothing, to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we said that 5 is nearly almost lethal, or nearly always lethal. So let's say shin and lower leg. Level 1, BL was blood loss. Shock is 3. That was the one that's temporary on the next round. And then pain is the one that endures, right? So level 1 would be no blood loss, 3 shock, and then a penalty of 2 due to pain. Okay. Whereas we go all the way up to blood loss of 13. Ow. Shock of 9, pain of 10, and limb is destroyed, instant knockdown. Okay. Let's go to upper leg. We got cutting upper leg. Advice from an old blade slinger. Hitting an opponent is easy, but not getting hit is hard. Allocate more dice to defense than to offense, and always be willing to evade should things get tight. Use maneuvers carefully. Most of them can spell the doom of your opponent when executed at the right moment, but beware, he might have a few up his sleeves as well. Whenever you fight someone that you have never fought before, especially in a duel or one-on-one setting, be extra cautious. You don't know how many dice he's got in his pool. Oh, so that should be hidden. And finding out the hard way usually leads to death. Ambushes, surprise attacks, dirty tricks, and guerrilla tactics have been working for thousands of years. They'll work for you too. So this is an overhand attack, left or right. So this is when you get into the neck, like, or the head, or the chest cross cut. BL1, shock 4, pain 5 for neck level 1, all the way to level 5 on the neck, total or near decapitation, instant death. Okay. A head, lower, including the face, goes from classic scarring cut, no blood loss or pain, but you've got shock, all the way through death, destruction of cerebellum, really messy. Head upper part, Goes everything from scalp cut after 1d6 exchange blood seeps into the eyes, CP reduced by 1/3 until wiped away, giving another 1d6 exchanges, and so on. Dizziness and bleeding, cracked skull, may lose consciousness, skull is shattered, character is unconscious and may not recover or will have brain damage if he does. All the way to real messy death, instant death. Real messy instant death. Very brutal, very brutal. Some people won't want this in their RPGs, right? Some people won't want it. Inner thigh, 1 to 3. Light laceration to a major artery has been severed. Death is likely. Hey, okay, let's go through more advice. Strike for unarmored body parts. If your opponent is using a lot of dice to protect his unprotected parts, throw several attacks at different unarmored parts of the body. Change location frequently. When he's gotten to a rhythm of allocating a steady quantity of dice against your attacks, go for the unarmored part again. Your opponent is likely to stick to his pattern, and you will strike his unprotected flesh. If this fails, resort to half sorting techniques or grappling. When he's pinned, stick him with the dagger. Always carry a dagger, especially if your primary weapon tends to be longer. You can't parry an arrow, nor can you dodge a curse. Unless you're close and fast, flee from sorcerers and archers. Catch them later with their guard down. Save luck dice for defense. Not getting hit is more important than hitting hard. Take advantage of longer weapons and close when against them. Use terrain to lower your opponent's combat pool. Take higher ground. Work him into a corner or push him off a cliff ledge. A little leather on the arms and legs and chain on the chest costs little money and has no CP loss. Never go into a big battle without armor, or at least a shield. Even the greatest swordsman can't defend all sides at once. Never get into a fight without a plan, reinforcements, or a way out. Puncture wounds. Everybody's gonna have to have these tables at the table. Although maybe you're not getting hit all that much. Bludgeon, blunt, and bashing attacks. Bludgeoning damage. So it's like Rollmaster with the tables. Reminds me of that. Bludgeoning hits. Bludgeoning hits. Bludgeoning. Bludgeoning. Generic damage table. This table is used for many magical attacks, cold, heat, and other non-specific body parts of damage. And here are weapon statistics. So here we've got arming sword, one-handed, length medium. That was important for closing. Attack TN when cutting and thrusting. It's defensive TN. It's cutting damage and it's thrusting damage that's added to that. Phew. Lots of stuff. Lots of stuff. Yes, exactly. Very savage. Retro Nerd Girl. Very savage. I want to try it. I want to try it. But phew. Okay, I guess that takes us through our beginning look at what is marketed as the most realistic combat system in all of role-playing history, at least up until its publication. What was that? 2001, 2002, something like that.